Please, sir. No one is going to stop for us. William Harrington looked up from the back seat of his black Cadillac Escalade, his finger resting on the window button. A young black woman stood beside the rear door, breathing as if she had run farther than her body could afford. A canvas bag was clutched against her chest, and a plastic grocery sack hung from her wrist, stuffed with folded baby clothes. One tiny blue sleeve stuck out from the top. The girl leaned slightly toward the opening, careful not to touch the car too much. "My mother's at Street Mary's," she said, words rushing out. "She's about to have my baby brother. She went into labor early, and she forgot her ID, the hospital papers, the baby clothes, everything. I was supposed to bring them, but I missed the bus. Please, sir, I need a ride." William glanced past her. At the corner, a CTA bus was already pulling away, its red lights shrinking into traffic. His driver, Marcus Reed, watched through the rearview mirror, quiet as always. "Call a taxi," William said. "I tried," she answered. "I don't have enough. The money I have is for the hospital. My mama saved it in a coffee can, and I can't spend it before I even get there." "Then wait for the next bus. It won't come for 40 minutes, maybe longer. Please, she's already hurting bad. She called me crying. She said they keep asking for things she doesn't have with her." William studied her face. He had seen fear before, and he had seen performance. Sometimes the story was true. Sometimes the story was a door into trouble. He kept his voice even. "No, I'm sorry." The girl stared at him as if she had heard him wrong. "Sir, please. I'm not asking for money, just a ride." I said no. My mother is about to give birth. That does not make it my responsibility. Her mouth tightened, but she did not snap back. William leaned back slightly. "I don't know you. You don't know me. If I let you into my car and you have some other intention, I'm the one exposed. I've seen this kind of thing before. A story, an emergency, a stranger asking for access. It can turn into an accusation, a lawsuit, a robbery, a headline. I won't put myself in that position. I'm not trying to do anything to you. That's what anyone would say." She looked down for a moment, then back at him. "I get why you don't trust me," she said. "But my mama can't wait just because people like me look dangerous to people like you." Marcus's hands shifted on the steering wheel. William's jaw tightened. "Young lady, you should be careful with what you imply." "I'm being careful with everything," she said, her voice breaking at the edge. "That's the problem. I'm careful with the money, careful with the papers, careful not to scare my mother, careful not to cry because if I start, I won't stop. I just need one person with a car to help me get there." "Wait for the bus," William said, looking away. "The bus is too late," the girl said, shaking her head, her voice trembling. "Then that is unfortunate," William replied, keeping his face cold. "My mother could have the baby before I get there," the girl said, fighting back tears. William glanced at his watch. "The hospital will handle it." The girl's hands tightened. "They're asking for her paperwork." William sighed, trying not to care. "They deliver babies every day." The girl looked straight into his eyes. "You don't know how they look at people who come in with nothing." William reached for the window button. "I can't help you." "Sir." The glass rose between them, cutting off her voice. Her face disappeared behind the tint, first her mouth, then her nose, then her eyes. When the window sealed, the noise of the street dulled. Inside the Escalade, the leather smelled clean, expensive, untouched by the cold. "Drive," William said. Marcus did not move right away. "Mr. Harrington, drive." Before the car could pull out, the girl's phone began ringing loudly outside. The sound came through the glass, sharp and panicked. She looked at the screen, fumbled with it, then answered. In her rush, she hit the speaker button. A woman's voice burst into the cold air, strained and urgent. "Family for Gloria Brooks? Whoever has her belongings, you need to come in now. She's fully dilated. We can't keep waiting on the paperwork, but she's asking for her daughter. She keeps asking for Annie." The girl pressed the phone with both hands. "I'm here. I'm not there yet. I'm trying to get there. Please tell my mama I'm coming." The hospital worker's voice softened but stayed hurried. "Honey, she needs you now. If you have her ID and the baby things, bring them straight to labor and delivery. Don't stop at the main desk. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am, I understand. She's in a lot of pain. We're moving fast." The call ended. For a moment, The girl just stood there, phone against her chest, eyes closed. Then she knocked on William's window. Knock, knock, knock. William stared forward. Knock, knock, knock. He lowered the window 2 inches. What now? He asked, colder than he felt. You heard them, she said. Please, she's asking for me. I heard enough. Then you know I'm not lying. I know a hospital called you. That doesn't change the risk. The risk? She almost laughed, but it came out like pain. My mother is in labor without me. My baby brother is coming. I have her ID, her papers, the only money we saved, and his clothes in this bag. That's my risk. William said nothing. She shifted the canvas bag higher on her shoulder and kept going. Faster now, afraid he would close the window again. I'll pay you back. I swear I will. I already told you, I don't need your money. I don't have money, not today. But I can work. I'll clean your office. I'll sweep floors. I'll carry boxes. I'll wash cars. Whatever you need. William looked at her then. She pressed on. If you get me to Street Mary's in time, I'll work until the ride is paid for. This is not a taxi. I know, and I don't hire people off the sidewalk. Then don't call it hiring. Call it paying a debt. You don't owe me anything because I haven't agreed to anything. Then let me owe you, she said. Please, let me owe you instead of standing here while my mother gives birth alone. The words landed harder than William expected. Marcus glanced back again. Sir, he said quietly, Street Mary's is 15 minutes if I take Wabash and cut across. William did not answer him. The girl heard it and leaned closer, hope flashing across her face before she tried to hide it. 15 minutes, she said. That's all I'm asking for. William's phone buzzed in his coat pocket. Outside, the girl stood with baby clothes in a plastic bag and a hospital worker's voice still echoing in the air between them. I can work a whole week, she said again, quieter now. No pay, no complaints. Just please get me there before he's born. William looked at her hands. They were red from the cold, one thumb wrapped in a small bandage. Yet the car had not moved, and the girl had not left. Inside the sealed warmth of the Escalade, William Harrington sat very still, staring at a stranger who was offering a week of her life for 15 minutes of his. For a long moment, William did not speak. The girl stood outside the car with the canvas bag cutting into her shoulder, waiting for his answer as if the whole city had narrowed down to the space between his window and the curb. Marcus kept both hands on the wheel, but his eyes stayed on William through the mirror. Mr. Harrington, he said, quiet enough that the girl might not hear. We're still parked. William looked at him sharply. I'm aware. Yes, sir. William turned back to the girl. What's in the bag? She blinked. What? The bag, what are you carrying? She opened it just enough for him to see without spilling everything onto the sidewalk. Her ID, her insurance card, the hospital folder, a clean nightgown, socks, a little blanket, some clothes for the baby, the money she saved. That's all, he repeated, though it was clear to him that it was not all. It was the proof that her mother had prepared as best she could. The girl misread his silence. I won't touch anything in your car. I can sit on the floor if you want. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories about kindness, justice, and hope. William frowned. Don't be ridiculous. I'm just saying I won't make trouble. That is not the point. Then what is the point? She asked, and this time the fear in her voice gave way to exhaustion. You keep saying risk, like I'm some kind of trap. I'm just trying to get to my mother. William could have shut the window again. He had every reason to do it. Every careful, practiced, polished part of him told him to end the conversation. Yet the hospital worker's voice still hung in the air. She's asking for Annie. He did not know why that line stayed with him, but it did. Now the girl outside his car shifted the weight of the bag again and looked toward the street, searching for a miracle that was not coming. William exhaled slowly. Get in. She stared at him. Sir? Get in the car. Her hand tightened around the strap. You mean it? I won't say it twice. She opened the door with care, as if the handle might break if she pulled too hard. The cold rushed in first. Then she climbed onto the leather seat with the bags gathered tight in her lap. She sat close to the door, knees together, shoulders drawn inward, trying to leave space between herself and every expensive surface around her. William noticed and looked away. Marcus pulled into traffic before William could change his mind. "Street Marys," William said. "Yes, sir." The girl buckled her seatbelt with shaking fingers. "Thank you. I mean it. I'll work. I'll come wherever you say. 1 week. We'll discuss that later." "No. I want you to know I meant it. I don't say things just to get what I want." William glanced at her. "Most people do. My mama doesn't. She raised me not to." "What does your mother do?" he asked before he could stop himself. "She works at Cole's Diner on Halsted. Some nights she cleans offices too, when her feet aren't too swollen." Annie looked down at the plastic bag. She was supposed to stop last week, but rent doesn't care when a baby is due. Marcus's eyes flicked up to the mirror. William kept his face still. Cole's Diner. The name meant something. A tenant in one of the smaller retail properties tied to a Harrington subsidiary, if he remembered correctly. He filed the thought away, not ready to examine it. Was there no one at the diner to help her? Mrs. Alvarez from the apartment upstairs drove her. She's got 3 kids at home, so she couldn't stay. Mama told her to go. That's how Mama is. She'll be in pain and still worry someone else is late for dinner. A phone buzzed in Annie's hand. She answered on the first ring. "I'm in a car. I'm coming." She listened, eyes fixed on nothing. "Tell her I'm close. Please tell her I'm close." William heard a muffled voice from the other end. Then Annie nodded even though the caller could not see her. "Yes, ma'am. Labor and delivery. I know. I won't stop at the desk." The call ended. Annie pressed the phone against her mouth for a second. Marcus took a turn a little faster than usual. "Traffic's backed up on Michigan. I'll cut west." William nodded. Annie looked at the driver. "Thank you, sir." Marcus met her eyes briefly in the mirror. "Just Marcus is fine." She seemed surprised by the kindness of a normal introduction. "Thank you, Marcus." They drove in silence for a few blocks. Chicago slid past in gray glass, bus shelters, food trucks, closing for the day. People hunched into coats. At every red light, Annie leaned forward as if her body could push the car faster. "She bought that blanket 2 months ago," Annie said suddenly. William turned slightly. "The blue one. She found it on clearance at a Walgreens. Said every baby should come home in something new, even if everything else was second-hand." A quick, embarrassed smile touched her face and disappeared. "She kept it in the dresser. Wouldn't let me use it for anything." William looked at the plastic bag. "Your brother's first blanket." "Yeah." Annie swallowed. "His name is Caleb. At least, that's what she wants. She said it means faithful. I don't know if that's true. She read it somewhere." "It's true enough," Marcus said from the front. Annie nodded, accepting that as comfort. William's phone buzzed again. He took it out and saw 3 missed calls from Bradley Stone and 1 from a board member. He silenced it and put it away. Annie noticed. "You can answer if you need to. I don't want to mess up your business." "You already have," William said. Her face fell. He heard the cruelty of it too late. "I meant my schedule," he added stiffly. "Oh." She looked down. "I'm sorry." William stared out the window. After a moment, he said, "That was unnecessary." She looked at him. "What I said," he clarified. "It was unnecessary." Annie nodded once. She did not smile, but something in her shoulders eased. They were 7 blocks from Street Mary's when traffic locked ahead of them. Brake lights burned red down the avenue. "No," Annie whispered. Marcus leaned forward, scanning the road. "Construction. I can get around it." "How long?" William asked. "Depends if the alley is clear." "Take it." Marcus turned sharply into a side street, then through a narrow service lane behind restaurants and loading docks. The Escalade barely fit. Annie gripped the seatbelt. William gripped nothing, but his jaw tightened. When they emerged 2 blocks from the hospital, Annie let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. "There," she said, pointing before anyone needed her to. "That's Street Mary's." The hospital entrance came into view, bright under the gray sky, with cars pulling in and out, and a security guard waving impatiently at a rideshare driver blocking the lane. Marcus stopped near the curb. Annie fumbled with the seatbelt. "Thank you. I'll come work. I promise. Just tell me where." William did not answer right away. Annie opened the door and stepped out, nearly dropping the plastic bag. She caught it, then bent to gather the canvas bag. Before closing the door, she looked back at him. "You got me here," she said. "I won't forget." Then she ran toward the hospital, baby clothes swinging from her wrist. the canvas bag banging against her hip. William watched her reach the sliding doors. She rushed inside and disappeared into the noise and light. Marcus kept the car idling. "Back to the office?" he asked. William should have said yes. Instead, he looked through the windshield at Street Mary's and saw Annie reappear inside near the entrance, stopped by a woman at the front desk. William's hand closed around the door handle. Marcus saw it in the mirror but said nothing. William opened the door and stepped out into the cold. The cold hit William the second he stepped away from the Escalade. Behind him, Marcus stayed in the driver's seat with the engine running, watching through the windshield as William crossed the hospital driveway toward the sliding glass doors. Inside Street Mary's, the air smelled of disinfectant, burnt coffee, and stress. Phones rang behind the reception desk. A television mounted in the corner played a daytime talk show no one was watching. A tired father paced near the elevators holding a pink balloon that had already started to deflate. Annie stood at the front desk gripping the canvas bag with both hands while a middle-aged woman in navy scrubs typed something into a computer without urgency. "I already told you," the receptionist said, not looking up. "You need to stop at admissions first." "My mother's upstairs," Annie replied, trying hard to stay calm. "Labor and delivery told me to come straight up. They called me. Do you have the insurance card?" "It's in here." Annie opened the folder with nervous fingers, nearly dropping several papers. "Please, can I just bring this to her first?" The woman sighed the way people did when they had repeated the same sentence too many times in one day. "Miss, rules are rules." Annie's face tightened. "My mother is having a baby, not applying for a mortgage." The receptionist finally looked up, irritation flashing across her face. "And raising your voice won't help." "I'm not raising my voice." "Then lower your tone." William stopped a few feet behind Annie. She had not seen him yet. From where he stood, he could see the tremor in her shoulders, the strain in her jaw, the exhaustion she had been holding together since the sidewalk outside his car. She opened the folder again. Several wrinkled bills and a hospital form slipped halfway out. "Please," Annie said. "They said she's asking for me. And I'm telling you I need the paperwork processed first." A nurse hurried past, pushing an empty wheelchair. Somewhere deeper in the hallway, a baby cried. Annie heard it too. William saw the sound hit her face like a wave. "She's up there alone," Annie whispered. The receptionist pointed toward another counter across the lobby. "Admissions." Annie looked toward it. The line had 6 people waiting already. William stepped forward before he had fully decided to. She said labor and delivery called her directly. Both women turned. Recognition crossed Annie's face first. Surprise came after it. "You came inside?" William ignored the question and looked at the receptionist. "How long will admissions take?" "That depends on the line." "And meanwhile, the patient is being treated." William glanced at Annie. Her mother forgot her documents during labor. This young woman brought them. "Why can't someone escort her upstairs while the paperwork is processed?" "Sir, we have procedures." "Procedures aren't the issue. Efficiency is." The receptionist straightened slightly. "And you are?" "William Harrington." The change in her face was immediate. Tiny, but immediate. Her posture adjusted, her tone softened by half a degree. "Oh, Mr. Harrington, I didn't realize." "No," he interrupted gently. "You realized exactly what you were supposed to realize. You just realized it too late." Silence settled for a second. Annie looked between them, confused. The receptionist cleared her throat. "If she leaves the desk before admissions checks the documents, we could have liability issues." William pulled out his wallet. "Then put whatever temporary hold or deposit you need on my card." Annie turned sharply. "No." William looked at her. "No? That wasn't the deal." The receptionist blinked, clearly unsure which part of this conversation she had missed. "I asked for a ride," Annie said quietly. "Not for you to pay for things." William lowered his voice. "This is not the time to argue, but it matters." Annie tightened her grip on the folder. "I said I'd work to pay you back. I meant that." The receptionist glanced between them again, now openly confused. William exhaled slowly. "Fine, then consider this an advance." Annie stared at him. "An advance? You said you planned to work. For a ride. And now you owe me paperwork too." For the first time since he met her, Annie almost smiled. It appeared for barely a second before worry pulled it away again. The receptionist took the card carefully. "I'll process the temporary admission hold." "Thank you," William said. Annie immediately opened the canvas bag again and started sorting papers with quick, anxious movements. William noticed how organized everything was despite the rush. Labeled envelopes, folded receipts, insurance forms clipped together, even a handwritten list in blue ink. "You packed all this?" he asked. "My mother did." Annie handed over the ID. "She writes lists for everything." The receptionist typed faster now. A nurse approached from the hallway. "Family for Gloria Brooks?" Annie nearly jumped. "That's me. You need to come now." Annie grabbed the bags, but one of the envelopes slipped loose and fell open on the floor. Several dollar bills spilled out, mostly ones and fives. She froze, embarrassed. William bent automatically to help gather them. Annie knelt too, trying to scoop everything up before anyone looked too closely. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "That's the hospital money." William handed her the folded bills. "No need to apologize." She avoided his eyes while stuffing the money back into the envelope. "It took her months to save." The nurse shifted impatiently. "We really need to move." Annie stood quickly. "Right. Sorry." She looked at William then, really looked at him, as if she still could not understand why he was standing inside this hospital after spending half an hour refusing to let her into his car. "You don't have to stay," she said. William surprised himself by answering honestly. "I know." The nurse led Annie toward the elevators. Halfway there, Annie stopped and turned back. "I meant what I said," she told him, "about working to pay you back." William almost told her to forget it. "My mama raised me better than breaking promises." Then she disappeared down the hallway with the nurse. William remained near the reception desk longer than necessary. The receptionist slid his card back across the counter carefully now, almost respectfully. "Mr. Harrington, I apologize if I seemed insensitive earlier." William took the card. "You seemed busy." Her face tightened slightly. "We see difficult situations every day." "I'm sure you do. People come in angry, scared. Sometimes they lie." William looked toward the elevators where Annie had vanished. "And sometimes they don't." The receptionist had no answer to that. Marcus appeared near the entrance a moment later. "Everything all right?" William slid the wallet back into his coat pocket. "I'm not sure yet. You staying?" William looked again toward the elevators, toward the upper floors where a frightened woman was giving birth while asking for her daughter. Then somewhere upstairs, faint through the hallway noise and hospital walls, came the sharp cry of a newborn baby. Annie's brother had arrived. The sound of the baby crying faded into the noise of the hospital, but William still stood near the reception desk as if something had anchored him there. Marcus glanced toward the elevators. "Healthy lungs," he said quietly. William gave a distracted nod. People continued moving through the lobby around them. A janitor pushed a yellow mop bucket past the waiting chairs. A nurse hurried by carrying charts against her chest. Somewhere near the vending machines, a tired man argued softly with an insurance representative over the phone. Life kept moving. Hospitals were built for that. Pain entered through one set of doors while relief exited through another. William should have left. Instead, he found himself walking toward the coffee stand near the waiting area. "You want one?" Marcus asked. William looked over. "Coffee?" Marcus nodded. William almost said no. Then he realized he had no real reason to rush back to the office except habit. "Black," he said. Marcus gave the cashier a few bills while William stood nearby, staring at the television mounted above the waiting room. Some afternoon news anchor was talking about rising housing costs in Chicago. The captions rolled silently across the screen while a young couple sat beneath it holding hands, waiting for news about someone upstairs. "Funny place for a billionaire to spend his evening," Marcus said after handing William the coffee. William took the cup. "Funny place for commentary." Marcus smiled slightly. "Fair enough." They sat in the waiting area near the elevators. William loosened his tie again, something he had already done 3 times since leaving the office. Across from him, a woman rocked a sleeping toddler while filling out forms on a clipboard balanced against her knee. William watched her for a moment. "How many times you been here?" he asked Marcus. "Hospitals," Marcus shrugged. "Enough." "No, sitting with people." Marcus leaned back in the chair. "Army hospitals, VA hospitals. My wife when she had our son." His expression softened briefly. "That one changes you." William looked down at his coffee. "Did it?" Marcus glanced at him carefully. "You tell me." Before William could answer, the elevator doors opened. Annie stepped out first. Her shoulders looked lighter now, but her eyes were swollen from crying. She still carried the canvas bag, though the plastic bag with the baby clothes was gone. A nurse followed behind her holding a clipboard. Annie spotted William immediately and stopped short. "You're still here?" William stood. Apparently. For a second, she looked as if she did not know what to do with that information. Then the nurse smiled at Annie. "Your mother's asking if the gentleman downstairs is family." William almost answered no at the same time Annie answered, "Not exactly." The nurse laughed softly. "Well, whoever he is, your mother wants to thank him before security throws him out for camping in the lobby." Annie let out a tired breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "She really said that?" "She did." The nurse handed Annie a visitor sticker. 10 minutes only. She needs rest. After the nurse walked away, Annie looked back at William. "You don't have to come upstairs." "I know. You keep saying that. And you keep repeating yourself about owing me work. That's because I mean it." William shook his head once, not arguing this time. Marcus stood. "I'll wait down here." William followed Annie toward the elevators. They rode up in silence at first, fluorescent lights humming overhead while the numbers climbed. "My mother's probably going to embarrass me," Annie said suddenly. "I doubt that. She talks too much when she's emotional. You talked plenty outside my car." Annie looked down, embarrassed. "I was desperate." "I noticed." The elevator doors opened onto the maternity floor. The hallway smelled warmer here. Softer somehow. Newborn cries drifted through partially open doors. A nurse wheeled a cart stacked with blankets past them. Annie slowed near room 214. "She's tired," Annie warned quietly, "and she doesn't like feeling helpless." William nodded once. When Annie pushed open the door, the room fell still for half a second. Gloria Brooks lay propped against white hospital pillows, exhaustion carved deep into her face. Sweat still clung near her hairline, and her hospital bracelet hung loose against her wrist. But despite the exhaustion, her eyes were sharp the moment they landed on William. A tiny baby slept in the clear bassinet beside the bed wrapped in the blue blanket Annie had carried across the city. "There's my girl," Gloria whispered first to Annie. Annie crossed the room immediately, setting the canvas bag down before leaning carefully over the bed. Gloria touched her daughter's cheek with trembling fingers. "You made it. I told you I would." Gloria looked toward William again. "And you must be the reason." William stepped closer to the bed. "William Harrington." Recognition flickered across Gloria's face. Not surprise exactly. More the cautious awareness that came when people from very different worlds ended up in the same room. "The William Harrington?" she asked. "That depends who's asking." Despite everything, Gloria smiled faintly. "The one with his name on half the buildings downtown." William gave a small shrug. "Some people like naming things after themselves." Gloria looked at Annie. "You got into a billionaire's car?" "Mama, don't start." "I'm just shocked, baby." William expected suspicion after that, maybe fear. Instead, Gloria looked toward the bassinet. "They told me she ran all the way home for my papers," Gloria said quietly. "Then she missed the bus." Annie sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "I got here." "You always do." Gloria's eyes filled slightly before she blinked the emotion away. Then she looked back at William. "Thank you for stopping." William slipped his hands into his coat pockets. "Your daughter was persistent. That's because I raised her with no choice but persistence." Annie groaned softly. "Mama." "What?" Gloria looked innocent for about 2 seconds. "You think that man would have let you in that fancy truck if you gave up after one no?" William surprised himself by laughing quietly. The sound seemed to relax Gloria more than anything else. Then her eyes narrowed at Annie. "Did you offer this man money we don't have?" "No." "Good. I offered to work." Gloria closed her eyes briefly. "Lord help me. It was fair," Annie defended quickly. "I wasn't asking for charity." William watched the exchange without interrupting. The room was small, cramped with machines and flowers from the nurse's station, but something about the way mother and daughter spoke to each other made it feel fuller than the penthouse waiting for him downtown. Gloria sighed and looked back at him. "I'm sorry if she sounded reckless out there." She sounded determined. That too. Gloria turned her head slightly toward the bassinet. "Would you like to meet the little troublemaker?" William hesitated. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. Yet stepping closer to a sleeping newborn somehow felt more dangerous. Annie noticed. "You can look. He doesn't bite." William moved beside the bassinet. The baby was tiny, smaller than William expected. One hand rested near his cheek, fingers curled tight as if holding onto something invisible. "Caleb," Annie said softly. "That's his name." William looked at the child for a long moment. Caleb yawned in his sleep. Something unfamiliar shifted quietly in William's chest before he pushed it down. "He's healthy?" he asked. Gloria nodded. 7 pounds and loud enough to wake the dead. "Definitely your son then," Annie murmured. Gloria reached weakly toward her daughter again. Annie immediately took her hand. William stepped back slightly, suddenly aware that he was standing inside a moment that belonged to them. "I should go," he said. Annie looked up fast, too fast. Then she caught herself. "Right, of course." But Gloria studied him for another second before speaking. "You don't look like a man in a hurry to leave, Mr. Harrington." William should have answered Gloria with something polished, something distant enough to reopen the space between their worlds. Instead, he looked once more at the sleeping baby in the bassinet and realized he did not actually know why he was still standing there. "Maybe I forgot what rushing home feels like," he said. Gloria watched him quietly for a moment, as if measuring the truth in that sentence. Annie adjusted the blanket near the baby's feet. "Most people rush home because somebody's waiting for them." William looked at her. The comment had not sounded cruel. That almost made it worse. He cleared his throat lightly. "I'm sure someone waits for me somewhere. Your assistant, probably," Annie said before she could stop herself. Gloria gave her daughter a tired look. "Annie, what?" "He looks like a man with assistants." William surprised himself again by smiling faintly. "You're not wrong." The room relaxed a little after that. Outside the hallway, a nurse laughed at something another nurse said. A cart rattled past the door. Life continued around them while inside room 214, the strange accidental connection between 3 exhausted strangers settled into something quieter. Gloria shifted carefully against the pillows, wincing slightly. "You all right?" Annie asked immediately. "I just had a whole human being," Gloria muttered. "I'm allowed to ache." Annie leaned forward to adjust her mother's blanket without being asked. William noticed how automatic the movement was. No hesitation, no impatience. Just care practiced over years. "You hungry?" Annie asked. "Starving." The cafeteria downstairs looked awful. All hospital food looks awful. Annie reached into the canvas bag. "Mrs. Alvarez packed you chicken and rice before all this happened." Gloria's face softened instantly. "That woman keeps half this neighborhood alive. She also said if you don't stop trying to work every extra shift, she's gonna smack you with a flip-flop." "That sounds like her." William listened quietly. He knew hundreds of powerful people in Chicago. Men who owned restaurants, banks, media companies, women who chaired charity boards and hosted fundraisers with crystal glasses worth more than most monthly rents. Yet the warmth in this tiny hospital room felt more genuine than half the conversations he had attended all year. Annie opened the food container carefully while Gloria looked toward William again. "You got children, Mr. Harrington?" The question caught him off guard. "No." "Wife?" "No." Gloria nodded slowly, not prying further. Annie glanced at him briefly before focusing back on the food. "Sorry if she asks too many questions. Pain medicine makes her nosy." "It made me nosy long before the medicine," Gloria corrected. William slid one hand into his coat pocket. "It's all right." The baby stirred suddenly, making a small, restless sound. Annie immediately moved to the bassinet. "Oh no, don't start that," she whispered gently. "You already stressed your mama out enough for one day." Caleb's tiny face scrunched before settling again. William watched Annie carefully tuck the blanket around him. Her movements were clumsy in places, uncertain in others, but protective all the same. "You've done this before?" he asked. "Babies?" Annie shrugged. "A little, mostly neighbors' kids. She raised half the children in our building for free," Gloria said proudly. "People trusted her." Annie rolled her eyes. "Mama." "It's true." William looked at her again. Outside his car, she had seemed desperate enough to break apart. Here, standing beside her baby brother, she looked steadier. Still tired. Still overwhelmed. But steadier. A knock sounded lightly against the door before a nurse stepped inside holding a clipboard. "Sorry," the nurse said, glancing at William. "Visiting hours are technically over." William nodded immediately. "Of course." But before he could move, Gloria spoke. "He drove my daughter across the city so she could get here before my son was born." The nurse looked at William with sudden understanding. "Oh, you're him." William almost asked who exactly him was supposed to mean. The nurse smiled. "Then you can stay another 10 minutes. After she left, Annie laughed softly under her breath. You've become hospital famous. That sounds unfortunate. It usually is. Gloria pointed weakly toward the chair near the bed. Sit down before you make me nervous, standing there like a lawyer about to deliver bad news. William hesitated, then sat. The chair creaked under him. Annie noticed and tried not to laugh. That chair barely survived my Uncle Jerome. I survived corporate mergers, William replied. I'll survive a chair. That earned a real laugh from her this time. For a few seconds, the room felt strangely normal. Then William's phone buzzed again. Bradley Stone. William stared at the screen before silencing it. Annie noticed. Your work keeps calling. It always does. You should probably answer. I probably should. But he made no move to leave. Gloria studied him carefully. You one of those men who works every hour God sends? William leaned back slightly. Something like that. That's dangerous. He almost laughed. Dangerous? You keep doing that long enough. Eventually you wake up rich and alone. The words landed harder than she intended. William knew because her expression shifted immediately afterward. I didn't mean, it's all right, he interrupted calmly. You're not wrong either. Silence settled for a moment. Annie looked between them, sensing something deeper passing through the room even if she could not fully name it. Finally, Gloria sighed softly. My husband used to work himself sick too. William glanced up. Annie's father? The second the question left his mouth, he knew he had stepped somewhere sensitive. Annie's shoulders stiffened. Gloria looked toward the ceiling for a moment before answering. Not anymore. William nodded once. I'm sorry. Don't be. Gloria's voice stayed calm, but tiredness edged through it now. Some people are only meant to stay long enough to teach you how strong you can become without them. Annie looked down at the floor. William did not ask anything else. The room grew quieter after that. Caleb slept. Gloria slowly ate a few bites of chicken and rice while Annie organized the scattered paperwork into neat piles again. You really keep things organized, William observed. My mama says paperwork is the difference between surviving and losing your lights. Gloria pointed her fork weakly toward Annie. That girl can find a receipt from 3 years ago in under 10 seconds. Annie shrugged. Because nobody else in the house can. William watched her straighten the hospital forms instinctively, corners aligned perfectly. A strange thought crossed his mind then, one so unexpected he almost dismissed it immediately. Still, it lingered. Annie finally looked up. What? I didn't say anything. You looked like you were thinking something expensive. Gloria burst out laughing so suddenly she started coughing. Even William laughed this time, and for the first time in longer than he cared to admit, the sound did not feel forced. William stayed another 20 minutes before finally standing to leave. Gloria had fallen half asleep between sentences, exhaustion pulling her under despite her attempts to stay awake. Caleb slept beside her in the bassinet with one tiny fist pressed near his cheek. Annie quietly adjusted her mother's blanket again before walking William toward the hallway. You really don't have to keep escorting me places, he said softly once the hospital door closed behind them. Annie shrugged. Mama would fuss at me if I didn't. She seems capable of fussing at people while recovering from childbirth. That's one of her strongest skills. William smiled faintly. The maternity hallway had quieted. Nurses moved with softer voices now. Most of the visitor chairs sat empty except for one older man sleeping upright with his arms folded across his chest. Annie stopped near the elevators. I meant what I said earlier, she told him again. About working. William leaned one shoulder lightly against the wall. You're persistent. That's not a no. No, he admitted. It isn't. She crossed her arms carefully. I don't want you thinking I'm the kind of person who takes favors and disappears. I never said that. You thought it. William looked at her for a moment before answering honestly. At first, yes. Annie nodded once, accepting it better than he expected. Most people do. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Neither of them stepped inside immediately. What kind of work were you planning to do exactly? William asked. Anything legal. That caught him off guard enough to laugh quietly. I'm serious. Suwani. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth before fading again. I work mornings at a grocery store near Ashland, she explained. Stocking shelves mostly, sometimes cashier shifts when somebody calls out. I can do evenings too. And school? I do online community college classes when I can afford them. William looked at her differently after that. Business? Accounting. She looked slightly embarrassed. I like numbers. That explains the organized paperwork. My mama says numbers matter because rich people always hide behind them. William almost answered defensively before realizing Gloria probably was not entirely wrong. The elevator doors began to close. Annie hit the button automatically. "You don't have to offer me a real job," she added quickly. "I can clean your office building or something. I just don't want to owe people." William studied her face. Tired eyes, frayed sleeve near the wrist of her coat, a young woman carrying responsibility the way other people carried backpacks. "You're very determined not to be pitied." Her expression sharpened immediately, because pity expires fast. The answer settled between them. William knew people who donated millions to charities for tax deductions and forgot the names of the neighborhoods they claimed to help. He had attended enough galas to recognize the difference between compassion and performance. But this girl standing in a maternity hallway had stripped the subject down to one hard truth in 5 words. Pity expires fast. The elevator finally arrived again. This time they stepped inside. As the doors closed, Annie glanced sideways at him. "You still think I'm dangerous?" William looked ahead at the glowing floor numbers. "I think you're stubborn." "That wasn't my question." "No," he admitted after a pause. "I don't think you're dangerous." "Good. But I do think you're capable of talking someone into things they had no intention of doing." That earned another quick smile from her. Downstairs, Marcus stood near the lobby entrance, holding 2 coffees. "Took long enough," he said when they stepped out. William raised an eyebrow. "You're getting comfortable." Marcus handed Annie one of the coffees. "Figured you could use it." Her eyes widened slightly. "You didn't have to do that. Hospital coffee tastes like boiled socks. This one's better." She took the cup carefully with both hands. "Thank you." Marcus nodded toward the cup. "Cream and sugar. Didn't know how you take it." "That's exactly how I take it." "Lucky guess." William watched the exchange quietly. Annie relaxed around Marcus in a way she still did not around him, maybe because Marcus spoke like someone familiar with ordinary struggle instead of someone observing it from outside armored glass. Near the entrance doors, a security guard waved at William. "Mr. Harrington." William nodded automatically. Annie noticed. "Everybody knows you here?" "I'm on the hospital board." Her eyes moved slowly back toward him. "Of course you are." Something in her tone made him glance sideways. "What does that mean?" "It means this whole time I was begging a hospital board member for a ride to the hospital." "You say that like it's incriminating." "It kind of is." Marcus coughed into his coffee cup to hide a laugh. William shook his head once. "I still brought you here, after saying no at least 15 times. 12. You counted? I negotiate for a living." Annie laughed softly into the coffee cup before she could stop herself. The sound lingered in William's mind longer than it should have. Outside, snow had started falling lightly across the city. Not enough to stick yet, just enough to soften the sharp edges of downtown streets and passing headlights. Marcus glanced toward the weather. "Roads'll get ugly soon." William nodded absently. Annie looked through the glass doors toward the dark street beyond the hospital driveway. "I should probably get back upstairs." "You should probably sleep first," Marcus said. She laughed once under her breath. "Not happening tonight." William reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. Annie stared at it, instead of taking it immediately. "If this is some billionaire card where I call and 20 assistants ask why I'm bothering you, I'm throwing it away. It's my direct office line. People like you have direct lines?" "Occasionally." She accepted the card carefully and read the name embossed across it. "William Harrington, Chairman and CEO, Harrington Group." Annie looked back up at him. "This feels expensive to hold." "It's paper. Fancy paper." William slipped his hands back into his coat pockets. "Call next week." "For the job? We'll discuss your debt." Annie shook her head lightly. "You really aren't letting that go?" "No," he said calmly. "Neither are you." For a second they simply stood there near the hospital entrance while snow drifted beyond the glass and the warm hospital lights reflected softly across the lobby floor. Then Annie surprised him again. "You know," she said quietly, "most people with money pretend not to see people like us at all." William looked at her carefully. "And what do you think now?" Annie glanced down at the business card in her hand before answering. "I think maybe you saw us anyway." William did not sleep much that night. By midnight he was back in his penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline. Standing barefoot near the windows with a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, snow drifted slowly across the city below, softening the rooftops and traffic lights into blurred colors. His apartment was silent except for the low hum of the heating system. Usually he liked the silence. He had spent years building a life quiet enough that nobody needed anything from him after business hours. No crying children. No arguments from another room. No unexpected knocks at the door. Just order. Tonight the silence felt different. Too large. He loosened his tie and dropped it onto the back of a chair, but his mind stayed stuck in room 214 at Street Mary's. Annie adjusting her mother's blanket. Gloria joking through exhaustion. The tiny blue baby blanket wrapped around Caleb. And that sentence, "Pity expires fast." William sat on the edge of the leather sofa and rubbed one hand across his face. He had heard thousands of polished quotes in boardrooms, charity dinners, campaign fundraisers. None of them stayed with him the way that simple sentence had. His phone buzzed again. Bradley Stone. William answered this time. "Where the hell have you been?" Bradley snapped immediately. "The investors waited almost 2 hours. I had something come up. You disappeared without explanation." William leaned his head back against the sofa. "The meeting survived. That's not the point. It rarely is with you." Silence crackled briefly through the line. Bradley lowered his voice slightly. "Listen, the Jensen redevelopment vote is next week. We cannot afford distractions right now." William stared out at the falling snow. "I'm aware. Good. Because the board's already nervous about the press around the South Side properties." There it was again. Numbers, properties, redevelopment, clean words for messy lives. William remembered Annie saying her mother worked at Cole's Diner on Halstead. One of the older retail strips connected to Harrington Group Holdings sat only blocks from there. "You still there?" Bradley asked. "Yes." "Then tell me you'll actually show up tomorrow." William almost answered automatically. Instead he asked, "Have you ever been inside Street Mary's maternity ward?" Bradley went silent. "What?" "Never mind. William, what is going on with you?" He looked down at the untouched whiskey in his hand. "I'm tired. That's why God invented assistants and private jets." "No," William said quietly. "Not that kind of tired." Bradley sighed heavily. "Get some sleep. We've got enough problems without you becoming philosophical." The call ended. William set the phone down and walked toward the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator, stared at shelves stocked by someone else, then closed it again without taking anything. On the counter near the sink sat the business card case he had used earlier. One card was missing now. Annie had it. The thought should not have mattered, yet somehow it did. He moved through the apartment slowly, turning off lights room by room until only the city glow remained through the windows. Expensive art lined the walls. Furniture chosen by designers filled the rooms. Every object looked perfect. Nothing looked lived in. His gaze stopped on a framed photograph near the bookshelf. Eleanor Harrington. His mother stood smiling beside him at a charity gala from years ago. Diamonds at her neck. Elegant black dress. Nobody looking at that photograph would have guessed she once counted grocery money in a cramped apartment kitchen. William picked up the frame. "You'd hate this place," he muttered softly. Not because it was luxurious. Eleanor had enjoyed comfort once she finally had it, but because she had believed comfort meant little if nobody else fit inside it with you. He remembered another thing she used to say when he was young. The quickest way to become poor is forgetting what poor feels like. At the time, he thought she meant money. Now he wondered if she meant something else entirely. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. William answered immediately. "Everything all right?" Marcus asked. "You calling to check on me?" "Maybe." William gave a quiet huff of amusement. Marcus continued. "Hospital called the driver desk." William straightened slightly. "What happened?" "Nothing bad. Annie forgot one of the folders in the back seat." William looked toward the coat he had tossed near the entryway earlier. "Important?" "Apparently baby paperwork and birth certificate forms." William closed his eyes briefly. "Of course." She sounded embarrassed. "Did she ask you to bring it?" "She asked if there was any way to pick it up tomorrow." William checked the clock on the wall. Duoblas spink tuadem. Snow still falling. Street Mary's nearly 30 minutes away now with the weather. Yet before logic could finish speaking, he already knew the answer. "I'll take it." Marcus laughed softly. "Thought so. You seem very entertained tonight. You brought a stranger to the hospital, stayed for the birth, skipped a board meeting, and now you're driving paperwork through a snowstorm at midnight." Marcus paused. "I've worked for you 6 years, Mr. Harrington. This is the most human you've acted the whole time." William almost argued. Instead, he picked up his coat. 20 minutes later, He was back in the Escalade with snow brushing against the windshield while downtown Chicago rolled by in silver and white. Marcus drove slower this time because of the roads. You know, Marcus said casually, most people in your position would have sent an assistant. Most people in my position have assistants who hate them. That true? Usually. Marcus glanced at him through the mirror. And yours? William thought about it. Claire tolerates me professionally. That's the nicest thing you've ever said about somebody from work. William looked out at the city again. Street Marys appeared ahead through the snowfall, glowing warm against the dark street. When they pulled into the entrance circle, William spotted Annie immediately through the lobby windows. She sat curled in one of the waiting chairs, still wearing the same thin coat, shoes untied now, head lowered over her phone while exhaustion dragged at every inch of her posture. Yet the second she saw the Escalade outside, she stood up fast, as if she had been waiting for it. Annie pushed through the hospital doors before Marcus had fully stopped the Escalade. Snowflakes caught in her hair as she hurried toward the curb, one arm wrapped around herself against the cold. Up close, William could see how exhausted she really was. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was wearing off now, leaving dark circles beneath her eyes and strain around her mouth. You came back, she said the second William stepped out of the vehicle. You left this. He held up the thick folder. Relief crossed her face so fast it almost hurt to look at. Oh my God. She grabbed the folder carefully with both hands. I thought I lost the birth forms. You did. I mean permanently. She pressed the folder against her chest and let out a long breath. Thank you. Marcus leaned against the driver's door. You planning to sleep at all tonight? Annie laughed weakly. Probably next Thursday. William noticed her untied shoes again. You're still here alone? My mama finally fell asleep. Annie glanced back through the hospital windows. The nurses told me to go home for a few hours, but every time I tried, I felt guilty. For sleeping? For leaving? She shrugged tiredly. It's stupid. It isn't, William said before thinking. She looked at him strangely then, like she was still adjusting to hearing understanding come out of his mouth. Snow drifted steadily around them now. Cars hissed past on wet streets. Somewhere nearby, a siren echoed through the city. Annie opened the folder quickly, checking the contents with nervous precision. William watched her organize everything automatically. Insurance forms, identification copies, birth paperwork, receipts folded into labeled envelopes. You really don't trust chaos, do you? He asked. My mama says poor people can't afford disorganization. The answer landed quietly between them. Marcus looked toward the hospital entrance. I'm grabbing coffee. Either of you want anything? Annie shook her head immediately. I'm good. Marcus gave William a look that clearly said she was lying before disappearing back inside. For a moment, the snowfall softened the city around them into silence. Then Annie looked down at the folder and muttered, I almost cried when I realized this was missing. You almost cried several times tonight. That doesn't count. Those were emergency tears. William folded his hands inside his coat pockets. There are categories now? Absolutely. Emergency tears are temporary. Broke tears last longer. Despite himself, William laughed quietly. Annie looked surprised at the sound again, like she still had not decided whether men like him were supposed to laugh naturally. You know, she said carefully, when I first saw your car, I almost didn't come over. Really? You looked expensive. William raised an eyebrow. That's a new insult. It's not an insult. She smiled faintly. It's just, people with money usually look through people like me, like we're part of the sidewalk. William looked toward the snowy street. I probably did at first. You definitely did. I let you in eventually, after accusing me of possibly robbing you. In my defense, you approached a billionaire's car on a dark street carrying unidentified bags. Annie shook her head. You watch too many crime shows. I read legal reports. That's worse. The hospital doors opened behind them as Marcus returned carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag. I ignored your answer and bought you one anyway, he told Annie. She accepted the cup slowly. You two always this stubborn? Marcus handed William the paper bag. That depends. William opened it. Inside sat a turkey sandwich wrapped in paper. He frowned. What's this? Marcus looked at Annie. Ask her. Annie immediately looked guilty. William understood before either spoke. You haven't eaten. I was busy. You haven't eaten since when? She avoided eye contact. Lunch, maybe. William stared at her for a long second. Annie sighed. Look, labor and delivery moves fast. Nobody's thinking about sandwiches while a whole baby is showing up. So instead, you plan to survive on coffee. I survive on coffee most days. Marcus muttered under his breath, and people wonder why society's falling apart. Annie laughed softly into the cup. William handed her the sandwich. She blinked. No, you're shaking. It's cold. It's exhaustion. I can buy my own food. At midnight? During a snowstorm? She opened her mouth to argue again. William gave her a look. To his surprise, she stopped. Fine, she muttered, but this counts toward the debt. Marcus turned away quickly, hiding a grin. Annie noticed. What? Nothing. You're both acting weird. William leaned lightly against the car. You assign emotional value to sandwiches. Because free food is dangerous. That answer erased the humor from his face. Annie realized it immediately. I didn't mean… No, William interrupted quietly. I understand what you meant. She unwrapped the sandwich slowly after that. For a minute, nobody spoke. The snow continued falling around them, while Annie ate carefully, almost embarrassed by hunger itself. William noticed she took small bites at first, the way people did when they were used to making food last longer. You don't have to ration it, he said. Her eyes flicked up toward him. Old habit, he realized. I know, she answered softly, though he could tell she didn't fully believe it yet. Marcus checked his watch. Roads are getting worse. Annie glanced toward the hospital windows again. I should head back upstairs before Mama wakes up. William nodded once, but neither of them moved immediately. Finally, Annie folded the sandwich wrapper neatly and looked at him. You know what the crazy part is? I'm afraid to ask. If you'd driven away tonight like you wanted to, she glanced toward the maternity floor above them. My mama would have still had the baby. Everything probably still would have happened. William stayed quiet, but I would have remembered that nobody stopped. The words settled into him deeper than he expected. Annie tightened her grip on the folder. People remember that kind of thing. Then she surprised him one more time. She stepped closer and held out her hand. Not for money, not for another favor, just a handshake. William looked down at it for half a second before taking it. Her hand was cold from the snow. Thank you for stopping anyway, she said. William held her hand a moment longer than necessary before letting go. Behind them, hospital lights glowed warm against the storm while traffic moved through the city beyond the falling snow. And somewhere inside himself, William Harrington felt a quiet crack begin to form in a life that had once seemed perfectly sealed. William watched Annie disappear back through the hospital doors before returning to the Escalade. Snow collected along the shoulders of his coat by the time Marcus pulled away from Street Mary's. Neither man spoke for several blocks. Chicago looked different after midnight. Less polished. Delivery trucks crowded alleyways behind expensive restaurants. Men in heavy coats swept snow from storefronts before morning customers arrived. A woman stood under a pharmacy awning smoking alone while buses dragged wet tire tracks through the slush. William rested one arm against the door and watched the city slide past. You thinking hard or regretting hard? Marcus finally asked. William glanced at him. You always this conversational after midnight? Only when billionaires start acting like human beings. William looked back out the window. You seem disappointed in the rest of us. Marcus shrugged lightly. Not disappointed, just used to it. The answer stayed with William longer than it should have. When they reached the penthouse building, the doorman hurried under an umbrella to open the car door. Evening, Mr. Harrington. William nodded automatically and stepped into the marble lobby. Warm air wrapped around him immediately. Quiet piano music drifted from hidden speakers. Everything smelled polished and expensive. Upstairs, the penthouse remained exactly as he left it. Silent, perfectly arranged, empty. He removed his coat slowly and stopped near the kitchen counter where the untouched whiskey glass still sat. For the first time in years, the apartment annoyed him. Too much space, too little life. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Claire, his assistant. William checked the hour before answering. You should be asleep. So should you, Claire replied immediately. Bradley Stone called me twice asking if you've lost your mind. William loosened his cufflinks. And what did you tell him? That I don't get paid enough to diagnose billionaires. Papers shuffled on her end of the line. You missed 3 investor calls, postponed tomorrow's breakfast meeting, and left half the board wondering if you'd been kidnapped. Efficient as always. I try. She paused. You okay? The question surprised him. Claire usually sounded professionally patient, not concerned. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. William sat at the edge of the kitchen island. Claire lowered her voice slightly. Marcus called. William closed his eyes briefly. Of course he did. He said you spent the evening helping some girl at Street Mary's. Marcus is becoming too social. That means yes. William rubbed one hand across his jaw. Her mother had a baby, and this required you personally? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Silence settled briefly through the line. Then Claire spoke carefully. You know, before she died, your mother used to drag you into places like that all the time. William looked up slowly. You remember that? He asked. She volunteered at shelters every Christmas for 10 years. Claire replied. You hated it. I was 16. You complained the entire time. I was very committed to being miserable. Claire laughed softly. Eleanor Harrington told me once that your biggest problem wasn't arrogance. She said it was loneliness. William leaned back against the counter, surprised by the sudden tightness in his chest hearing his mother's name spoken out loud. She really said that? She said lonely people build walls and then convince themselves the walls are success. William stared across the apartment. Glass walls, steel walls, security gates, penthouse elevators. Annie's voice slipped unexpectedly into the silence afterward. People remember that kind of thing. Claire spoke again. Whatever happened tonight? You sound different. Different how? Like you stopped talking to everyone from behind a conference table. William gave a quiet huff of amusement. You all talk about me like I'm a difficult zoo animal. That's because you bite investors. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Claire's tone softened after a moment. Get some sleep, William. I have meetings at 8. You also have eyes. They probably need rest. The call ended. William stood alone in the kitchen a while longer before walking toward the hallway. He passed framed photographs from charity events, corporate dinners, ribbon cuttings. Hundreds of people smiling beside him. Yet none of the pictures carried warmth the way a tired girl clutching hospital paperwork somehow did in his memory now. He stopped near the guest room. The room had not been used in over 4 years. Perfectly made bed, decorative pillows nobody touched, a lamp never switched on. Without fully understanding why, William walked inside and sat at the edge of the mattress. He remembered Annie saying she felt guilty leaving the hospital even for a few hours. He remembered the way she rationed a sandwich without realizing she was doing it. The way she held on to dignity like somebody trying to keep the last dry match during a storm. People with money usually look through people like me. William looked around the untouched room again. Maybe they did. Maybe he had. The next morning came too fast. By 7:30, he sat at the head of a long conference table 30 floors above downtown Chicago while executives discussed redevelopment figures projected across massive screens. Property acquisition costs remain manageable, one analyst said, especially near the Halstead corridor. William looked up sharply. A map glowed on the screen. Cole's Diner sat directly inside one of the highlighted redevelopment zones. Bradley Stone tapped a folder against the table. Once we clear the remaining tenants, construction moves fast. William's eyes narrowed slightly. Clear? Bradley shrugged. Buyouts, pressure, rent adjustments, whatever closes the properties. And the people working there? The room grew quiet. Bradley frowned. What kind of question is that? A direct one. A few executives exchanged glances. Bradley leaned back slowly. William, these are old commercial blocks. Half the tenants can barely stay afloat already. William looked again at the map. Cole's Diner, Halstead, Gloria Brooks working double shifts while pregnant. Something cold settled heavily in his chest. Bradley continued talking, but William barely heard him now. For the first time in years, the numbers on the screen no longer looked abstract. They looked personal. William barely heard the rest of the meeting. Voices continued around the conference table discussing percentages, zoning approvals, projected returns, but his attention stayed fixed on the highlighted blocks glowing across the screen. Halstead Corridor. Cole's Diner sat there in a red outline like a target. Bradley tapped the digital map with a silver pen. Once we finish the acquisitions, we can finally clear out the older businesses and bring in tenants that actually generate revenue. William looked up slowly. Clear out. Bradley sighed. You're repeating words again. I'm making sure I heard them correctly. One of the younger executives shifted awkwardly in his chair. Another suddenly became very interested in his laptop screen. Bradley leaned back. This isn't personal. It's business. William stared at the map a moment longer before speaking. How much are we increasing the rent? Depends on the block. Some tenants will get priced out naturally. Naturally, William felt something tighten in his chest. "How generous of us," he muttered. Bradley frowned. "What's gotten into you since yesterday?" William ignored the question. "How many businesses are affected?" "About 32 directly." "And employees?" Bradley shrugged. "Couple hundred maybe." The answer came too easily. William looked around the room. Nobody else seemed disturbed. Pens moved. Coffee cups lifted. People waited for the conversation to continue like this was weather instead of livelihoods. Then he thought about Gloria standing in a diner kitchen 9 months pregnant because rent did not pause for swollen feet. He thought about Annie counting sandwich bites without realizing she did it. He thought about Caleb arriving in a world already preparing invoices for him. Suddenly the room felt colder. "Move on," William said quietly. Bradley narrowed his eyes slightly but continued the presentation. An hour later the meeting finally ended. Executives filtered from the room carrying tablets and folders while assistants rushed in to collect untouched pastries and coffee cups. William remained seated. Bradley stayed behind. "That was strange," Bradley said once the room emptied. William loosened his cufflinks slowly. "Was it? You're asking emotional questions about commercial property. They're still questions." Bradley crossed his arms. "You built this company by understanding reality. Those buildings are dying. We replace them. Or somebody else will." "At what cost?" Bradley stared at him. "Since when do you care?" The honesty of the question irritated William more than it should have. People work there. People work everywhere. Families depend on those businesses. Bradley laughed once under his breath. "You spent one night around ordinary people and suddenly you're St. Francis." William stood. "That enough?" Bradley raised both hands slightly. "Fine, but don't confuse sympathy with strategy." William stepped toward the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Snow still clung to rooftops below while morning traffic crawled through the streets. "You ever notice," he said quietly, "how people with money always call destruction strategy?" Bradley stared at him like he no longer recognized the man standing there. "What happened last night?" William looked at his reflection in the glass before answering. "A girl asked me for help." Bradley blinked. "That's it? That's enough sometimes." Silence settled heavily between them. Finally, Bradley grabbed his tablet. "You're getting sentimental in your old age." William did not respond. After Bradley left, William stood alone in the conference room another few minutes before pressing the intercom button near the table. "Claire." Her voice came immediately. "Yes? Get me everything on the Halstead redevelopment plan." A pause. "Everything?" "Tenant records, lease increases, buyout offers, complaints, all of it." "All right. And Claire?" "Yes?" "Find Cole's diner in the files." Another pause, shorter this time. "The diner from yesterday?" William looked out at the city again. "Yes. I'll send it over." By noon, a thick folder sat on his desk. William opened it slowly. Cole's diner had occupied the same corner property for 23 years. Family owned. Narrow profit margins. 3 rent increases in 4 years. Another increase scheduled in 60 days under the redevelopment adjustment plan. Projected closure risk. High. Projected relocation probability. Unlikely. William stared at the page. The language bothered him now. Clean words wrapped around ugly realities. Closure risk. Relocation probability. No line in the report mentioned Gloria Brooks working through contractions because missing shifts meant falling behind. No line mentioned Annie balancing community college classes while stocking grocery shelves. No line mentioned a newborn baby sleeping beneath fluorescent hospital lights less than 12 hours earlier. To the company, they were simply projected displacement figures. A knock sounded at the office door. Claire stepped inside carrying another stack of files. Mid-40s, sharp-eyed, efficient in a way that terrified junior executives. "You're reading them differently," she observed quietly. William glanced up. "What?" "These reports." She nodded toward the folder. "Usually you skim numbers in under 30 seconds. Today you're reading names." William leaned back slowly in his chair. Claire studied him a moment longer. "That girl matter to you already?" "It's not about that." "But?" William rubbed one hand across his jaw. "I spent years convincing myself that business decisions happen far away from real people." Claire set the files down carefully. "And now?" He looked again at the folder. Now he could see Annie carrying grocery bags through snow while executives discussed displacement over catered breakfasts. Now he could hear Gloria saying some people only stay long enough to teach you how strong you can become without them. Now he remembered his mother warning him not to become so important that other people stopped looking human. Claire broke the silence carefully. You planning to change the redevelopment deal? William did not answer immediately. Finally, he said, I don't know yet. But you want to? It was not a question. Before William could respond, his office phone rang. Claire glanced at the display. Unknown number. William almost ignored it out of habit. Then something made him pick up. William Harrington. A small pause came through the line before Annie's voice answered carefully. Hi, it's me. Without meaning to. William sat up straighter. Annie, I hope I'm not bothering you. He looked around the massive office, the skyline stretching behind him, the million-dollar silence surrounding the desk. For the first time all morning, the room felt less empty. You're not bothering me, he said. William turned slightly in his chair, one hand still resting on the redevelopment file spread open across his desk. How's your mother? He asked. Tired. Bossy. Already arguing with nurses. Annie's voice softened slightly. So? Pretty normal. Without realizing it, William smiled faintly. That's good to hear. There was a brief pause on the line, the kind where someone debates whether to continue speaking. I almost didn't call, Annie admitted. Why? Because people like you usually hand out business cards they never expect anyone to use. William glanced at the card holder near his desk. I meant it when I gave it to you. Yeah, she said quietly. I'm starting to realize that. Claire stood near the office door, pretending not to listen while very obviously listening. William turned his chair slightly away from her. What do you need, Annie? I wanted to ask about the work thing. The debt, William corrected. Annie sighed dramatically through the phone. You're really enjoying that joke. More than I should. Another pause followed, lighter this time. I can come by after my grocery shift tomorrow, she said. If the offer was real. It was. Claire raised one eyebrow from across the room. William ignored her. You know where the Harrington building is? He asked. Annie laughed softly. Sir, half the city knows where the Harrington building is. Fair point. But I've never actually been inside. Most people haven't. That sentence sounds expensive too. William leaned back slightly in his chair. You say that about everything. Because rich people make normal things sound private. Before he could answer, voices rose faintly through Annie's side of the call. Hold on, she muttered. William heard muffled movement, then Gloria's tired voice somewhere nearby. Who's on the phone? Nobody. That means somebody. Mama. William looked down at the desk, fighting back unexpected amusement. Then Gloria's voice grew louder suddenly. Is that Mr. Fancy Truck? Annie groaned in horror. Mama. William covered part of his mouth with one hand, laughing quietly before he could stop himself. I can hear you both, he called into the phone. Good, Gloria answered immediately. That means your rich ears still work. Annie sounded mortified now. Please ignore her. Absolutely not, Gloria replied somewhere farther from the phone. That man drove through snow at midnight with paperwork. He deserves respect. I feel very respected already, William said dryly. That earned a tired laugh from Gloria. Then Annie came back on properly. Sorry. Pain medication removed her filter. I'm beginning to think she never had one. That too. The warmth in the conversation surprised William. Normally phone calls lasted exactly as long as necessary in his world. Efficient. Controlled. People called because they needed contracts, signed, or decisions made. This felt different. Messier somehow. Human. Annie cleared her throat softly. Anyway, I can be there around 5 tomorrow. Claire will put you on the schedule. Claire mouthed the word schedule. Silently across the office. William ignored that too. What exactly am I doing? Annie asked. We'll figure that out. That sounds suspicious. It's temporary work. You still sound suspicious. Claire finally interrupted from across the room. Ask her if she knows spreadsheets. William looked up sharply. Annie heard the distant voice immediately. Was that your assistant? Yes. She sounds terrifying. She is, Claire answered loud enough for the phone to hear. Annie laughed again. The sound carried strangely through the office, warm enough that even Claire's expression softened for half a second. Well, Annie said after the laughter settled, Tell your terrifying assistant I know spreadsheets better than most grocery managers. Claire crossed her arms. I like her already. William shook his head slightly. You two are becoming very comfortable. That's because your office probably needs normal people in it, Annie replied. William glanced around the enormous executive office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, black marble shelves, awards lining the walls. Normal had not existed in this room for a long time. Maybe it does, he admitted quietly. Silence settled briefly between them again. Then Annie spoke more softly than before. I meant what I said last night. About what? People remember who stopped. William looked down at the redevelopment file still open beside his hand. For years he had signed approvals without seeing faces attached to them. Entire neighborhoods reduced to investment language. Now one phone call from a tired girl in a hospital room made the whole system feel different. Annie, he said slowly, does your mother know about the redevelopment plans on Halstead? The line went quiet. When she answered again, her voice had changed. A little. William straightened in his chair. What does that mean? It means everybody's scared, she admitted carefully. The diner owners. Grocery stores. Barber shops. Rent keeps climbing. And nobody knows who's getting pushed out next. William closed the file slowly. Your mother talked about it? She tries not to in front of me. Annie paused. But I hear things. And Cole's diner? Another silence. Then Annie answered honestly. They already cut staff hours last month. Something cold settled hard in William's stomach. Claire watched his face carefully now. William? Annie asked softly. You still there? Yes. You got quiet. He stared through the office windows at downtown Chicago stretched beneath winter clouds. For years, the city belonged to him in the way powerful men believed cities belonged to them. Buildings, contracts, developments, numbers. Now he could suddenly see the people inside those numbers. I'm here, he said finally, and for the first time in a very long time. William Harrington sounded like a man who had just realized the world he built might be hurting the very people he was beginning to care about. After the call ended, William remained seated behind his desk long after the office had gone quiet again. Claire still stood near the door watching him carefully. You're thinking too loudly, she said. William looked up slowly. Is that a real sentence? It is when you start staring at buildings like they personally offended you. His eyes drifted back toward the redevelopment file. They did offend me. Claire walked closer to the desk. You can stop the project, you know. William gave a dry laugh. Nothing that size stops cleanly. But you own the company. I own responsibility. That's different. Claire folded her arms. You sound like your mother. The words settled heavily in the room. William leaned back in his chair and looked again at the highlighted map. Streets, businesses, lives reduced to colored blocks. Then he remembered Annie standing outside his SUV in the cold saying, Please, sir. No one is going to stop for us. At the time he thought she meant traffic. Now he understood she meant something much bigger. How long before the rent increases hit? He asked quietly. Claire glanced at the file. Official notices go out Friday. 3 days. Yeah. William stood suddenly. Claire blinked. That look usually means lawyers are about to suffer. Get Bradley back in here. 20 minutes later, Bradley Stone entered the office already irritated. I'm in the middle of another meeting. You'll survive. Bradley stopped once he saw the redevelopment files spread across the desk. Oh no. William stayed standing near the windows. We're freezing the Halstead increases. Bradley stared at him. Absolutely not. It wasn't a suggestion. You can't pause a project this large because you suddenly discovered poor people exist. The bluntness of the sentence hung in the office. Claire quietly shut the door. William turned slowly. Say that again. Bradley threw one hand into the air. You know what I mean. No, William replied calmly. I know exactly what you mean. Bradley exhaled sharply. William, this project has investors attached to it. Contracts. Timelines. We've already pushed half the tenants to prepare for turnover. That's the problem. That's business. William walked back toward the desk. A woman worked double shifts through pregnancy because our rent increases forced the diner to cut staff. Bradley stared at him in disbelief. This is about that girl. This is about people. It's always people. Somebody loses every redevelopment deal. William's jaw tightened slightly. You ever sit in a hospital maternity ward at midnight and realize your company helped create the panic sitting in somebody's chest? Bradley laughed once without humor. There he is, St. William of Chicago, The room went still. Claire looked down at her tablet. William stepped closer to Bradley now, voice lower and calmer than before. "My mother grew up poor on the South Side," he said. "You know what she used to tell me? The quickest way to become cruel is pretending struggle belongs to somebody else." Bradley shook his head. "You built $1 billion company by not thinking emotionally. And maybe that's the problem too." For a moment neither man spoke. Then Bradley looked toward the skyline windows and muttered, "You really changed overnight." William thought about Annie rationing sandwich bites without noticing, about Gloria calling him Mr. Fancy Truck, about Caleb sleeping under fluorescent lights while executives discussed displacement percentages. "No," William said quietly. "I think I just finally paid attention." Bradley rubbed one hand across his face. "Freezing the project costs millions." William nodded once. "Then we'll survive on slightly less money." "That's not how boards think." "Then they can argue with me." Claire almost smiled at that. Bradley looked between them both before finally pointing toward the files. "You stop this now. Every tenant in the district's gonna expect special treatment." William answered immediately. "Basic dignity isn't special treatment." Silence hit the room again. Finally, Bradley grabbed the edge of the chair beside him and sat heavily. "You're serious?" "Yes." "What exactly are you planning?" William looked down at the Halstead reports one final time before closing the folder completely. "New lease caps, rent stabilization for existing family businesses, relocation assistance where redevelopment's unavoidable." He paused. "And I want an internal review on every property manager forcing pressure tactics." Bradley stared at him like he had lost his mind. "You'll have investors screaming. They'll survive too." Claire stepped forward slightly. "Publicly, this could actually help the company." Bradley looked at her. "You too?" She shrugged calmly. "Turns out not crushing neighborhoods photographs well these days." Despite the tension, William let out a quiet laugh. Bradley pointed at him immediately. "That girl really got into your head." William thought about the handshake outside Street Mary's. Cold fingers, honest eyes. A tired voice saying people remember who stopped. Then he answered honestly, "Yeah, she did." The office fell quiet after that. Outside the windows, snow still clung to the edges of downtown Chicago while far below. People hurried through cold streets carrying groceries, pushing strollers, unlocking storefronts before lunch crowds arrived. For years, William Harrington looked down at the city like a man studying property. Now, for the first time in a very long while, he was starting to see people instead. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change more than one life. This story reminds us that real wealth is not measured by money, power, or status, but by the ability to see humanity in people others ignore. When William finally stopped and listened, he didn't just help Annie reach the hospital, he rediscovered compassion, responsibility, and the kind of connection money can never buy. In a world where many people look away, the story teaches that being the one who stops can quietly change everything. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.